Hello and welcome back, travelers, to the Tavern After Dark. If this is your first time showing up, thank you again. I really do appreciate it. Please subscribe, hit that like button, share with somebody who might find some value, some benefit out of what we talk about here. But thank you again if you are returning, and this is your second, third, fourth, maybe eighth time. Uh, Thank you. It really does mean a lot, and the message is out there. I really want to try and help those that need a perspective. We talk a lot about perspective here, and I think there's a lot of value to that, right? Understanding what other people go through, and while it may not be the same thing, we all understand the emotions, right? What it makes us feel, how it makes us react. We all react differently, right? But the emotions are still there. They're raw. They're real. And again, here at the tavern, we are raw. We are real. We are not scripted. Like I said, we do have a general outline we want to go by. And as you can see tonight, we've another curveball. We had to run a solo podcast. My other guest could not make it tonight. But our next podcast, I think we're going to be rejoining my good buddy Nick. So, hey Nick, I hope you're here. But we will be jumping back onto playing some video games, right? Something to help us decompress. So thank you again. If this is your first time, if you're just returning, like I said, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Please share this with somebody. Well, let's get into it. Tonight's episode is very special to me. Is It's something that I've kind of built over, I guess, a long time of my life. I used to love fishing on the river, floating down the river. Those of my friends from Idaho that are still listening, we would float every summer, just leisurely float down the river. But I want to talk about the river, and I want you to imagine being upstream from wherever you're at, right? You can see downstream, you see there's a bridge coming, there's a waterfall coming, right? You can plan for that. You can prepare for that. And so tonight's message is really about finding happiness, but how are we going to find that happiness, and what's the equation, right? How can we solve the end all be all pursuit of happiness? And many of us may never find that end all be all goal of happiness, but there are a lot of people out there that have found an embodiment of happiness, whether it be through faith, their reconnection with nature. So, what we want to focus on, though, is what happens upstream before we get down to that point, right? Are you preparing? Or do you know there's a disaster coming up down the road and you're doing nothing but just watch idly as you get closer and closer and closer? So you're not planning, you're not preparing, right? And it could be a number of reasons. You could be burnt out because you've been working too many hours. I get it. You got a newborn kid. I'm a father of two daughters, beautiful daughters, but you again run into those situations where you're running on empty. I get it. It's hard to push forward and plan for what you know is going to be down the road, downstream. It could be marriage related. It could be your business is bleeding money, and you're going to have to file bankruptcy if things don't change. But then you don't make a plan to change. So what do you do with that? Till the body is broken, right? And you can no longer move forward, and then everything simply just falls apart. You get to that waterfall and you fall off, and there's no coming back from that, right? But what we can do before we get there will tell us everything, right? We can get to that point and, oh, we found a good exit and a way to get safely down the waterfall, right? We planned, we prepared for the windfall, and maybe it's not always so easy, right? But the example is there. A lot of us fail to plan, fail to prepare. You could think of it like natural disasters. People are warned over and over again, and they still stick it out. And I get it, right? You have things you want to protect, and you think you can withhold and withstand the storm. Many people can't. Some do. Some walk away from it. It's not always so easy. So I want to dive into kind of the core idea here: upstream versus downstream, right? So upstream, if we're downstream thinking, we're reacting, right? So if you're waiting till you get downstream, you're waiting till something comes up to then react and try and figure everything out. So rather than having 2 years to plan for something, you have, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes. Little, again, reaching, right? But the idea is there. Upstream thinking, if I'm planning upstream, I'm designing my life, right? At least somewhat, right? I'm not going to say we have control of everything. That's not what it is. But downstream is, think of it this way. It's therapy after you collapsed, right? Maybe mentally you're struggling, you know you're struggling, and you're not sure how you're getting out, but you just let it keep happening. And therapy doesn't have to be going into somebody. It could be talking to a best friend, your mom, whoever you trust in that level. Or therapy is wonderful because you have a non-biased opinion and somebody who's educated in the way our brains and psychology, how we work. They're educated in that. So it's good to have another valued opinion. You don't have to do what they say, but use it as a perspective, right? So downstream is okay, debt after you realize like, okay, I have $35,000. I'm going to go out and quit my job because I got all this money. And then you go out and spend thousands of dollars on clothes and food, and suddenly you see it dwindle, and now you look at it and you've got 5,000, 4,000, 3,000, and you just quit your job a couple months ago. It's not as easy, but it is when you see $35,000 in your bank account. So motivation after discipline is gone. It's apologizing after the damage, right? And you're now apologizing to yourself, saying, I could have done better. It's like going back to say, hey, I wish I was in high school again so I could make some different choices. Right. We all wish we could go back. So that's the downstream thinking idea, right? It comes with a lot of cons, a lot of things that are a struggle. So what you do need to pick though is what you handle upstream and what you handle downstream, because you can't handle everything upstream. You can't plan, you can't prepare for everything. So think about what happens when life collapses in ways that you can't control. So talking about upstream though is building boundaries before you have that burnout, realizing that, hey, I'm working 16-hour days and I'm on week 10. It's probably time to take a vacation, get some rest, do what you got to do. But the system, right, it's setting up systems before chaos, right? When you like think project management in a business, they're going to set up systems and checks and balances, right, to make sure that this project is going to go accordingly. Movies, video games, they all do it. They all have upstream thinking. There are systems in place. They've identified what they want, how they want it, right? The W6 method, uh, R3, right? There's all these things that will help you upstream that I've talked about before. But the thing that we have to understand is happiness isn't an emotion you chase. It's literally a byproduct of upstream decisions made daily. If that makes sense, right? So if I'm actively making decisions upstream, knowing that, okay, when I get downstream, I might have some points where I'm not happy. And that is, I mean, that's human nature, and it's healthy to have those ups and those downs because nobody can ride that high. Again, it goes back to that burnout. Your brain, your body doesn't work that way. Cortisol levels, right? Dopamine levels, they have to balance, right? And so you're going to have all these things within your body that you can't always avoid, but you do have decisions you can make daily. Like, I'm going to brush my teeth when I go to bed. And when I get up in the morning, why? Because I don't want to have to go to the dentist and have to rip all my teeth out or pay thousands of dollars to to get my teeth taken care of. Active choice, right? That is a choice I can make to now be happy, at least in that regard. And I'm not making myself unhappy, right? If my teeth were all falling out and I couldn't eat the foods I enjoyed because I didn't take care of my teeth, then I would be unhappy. So if you see what I'm saying, like the simplest things can change the world, but we aren't doing it, or not many of us are anyway. So why do we avoid doing the work upstream? Why is there this inevitable procrastination? I am the best example of that. I did that throughout high school because I knew I could get by. I was intelligent enough to get A's, B's, and the occasional C in math because I didn't like math. But I did it and I procrastinated. And then I got into college, 19, and procrastination doesn't work in college, not quite like it did in high school. So now here I am unhappy because college isn't working out for me. What used to work for me, and again, if I would have dedicated my time and, you know, fixed some of those bad habits, then I could have been happier. I could have been successful sooner. Cool. So we can go back and be like, oh man, I wish I changed that. No, look at it now and start planning for what else is downstream. You're still upstream. That's the way to think about it. 30 years old, 40 years old, 50 years old, you're still upstream. So making conscious decisions to change your diet because maybe you are starting to realize I am getting older. Excuse me. You are getting older, or I'm getting older. We're all getting older, right? But putting the right foods in our body, taking walks, right? It doesn't have to be extreme exertion, exercise, but there are things we can do to to really value our lives more, which is going to help us value other people's lives. Right? It's if you don't value yourself, you're not going to value somebody else, and that is a hard thing to say. I know, but it's the same way. If you're not happy with yourself, it's going to be hard to help other people be happy, at least in the grand scheme of things. And there are people that outwardly do that. And, again, we can look in our generational actors, in just general people, they all want to try and make other people happy because it's harder for them to find happiness. That's what we need to step back from because that's why we have soldiers committing suicide and the the heartbreak that families deal with because somebody okay didn't talk about it, right, or somebody didn't have the right tips, or again just the right support system. So that is the hardest part, but if we can support those around us, but we have to start by supporting ourselves. So upstream upstream work is boring. It's planning, right? All it is planning. It's projecting. So you're just basically doing paperwork at this point. You're daydreaming in a way, but you're planning because this is an invisible time frame where nothing may be going on, but the inevitable is downstream, and you know at this point you can plan for it. So think of it that way, right? You have to put the purpose back into why upstream work is going to value you downstream, right? Maybe you want to take that vacation next year. That's downstream. So downstream isn't always a negative thing, but downstream is our best way of understanding how to plan and how to plan for, let's say, the inevitable. But no one's going to clap for what you're doing now. It's the ultimate outcome. And then you're going to clap for yourself because the upstream work you've done, you've taken the energy. Downstream, you're not going to have to paddle as hard, right? To get out of the sticky water, right? The sticky situations where you just are stuck. And those of you that have ever whitewater rafted, you understand when you get pulled over, you get basically tossed into a cycle like you're in a washing machine. And it's hard to get out of that. But if you can plan and have a team with you and the right gear and equipment, you can get out of that situation much easier simply by planning upstream. You know it's coming, plan for it. At least plan for what you can. So, kind of the truth bomb here, I guess, is most people don't fail. They avoid responsibility long enough for the consequences to arrive. If that makes sense. And that comes with, excuse me, that comes with lying, that comes with failing. I think it's just human nature. It's easy to avoid, but if we avoid responsibility long enough, the consequences will eventually arrive, and you'll be forced to quit at that point. You'll be forced to fail, and that's where we again can plan upstream to avoid that inevitable downstream consequence. So I know a lot of people are listening at this point and like, oh man, he's just rambling. And there's a point to all of it, right? And there's this myth that happiness isn't really a thing. Um, and it's sold as like, let's say, comfort, right? Having a nice hotel over a terrible hotel. Sure, that could make you unhappy, but genuinely comfort, escape, pleasure, validation, these are all things that what happiness is sold as. We are trying to appease other people, and that's what makes us happy. There's something wrong with that because that's not what's going to make you happy. The real happiness is stability, which is the planning. It's the boring part. It's the alignment, making sure your stars align, making sure your plans align. excuse me. And it goes back to the W6 method and the SMART goals and the R3 framework and all the things that I've talked about. That's what's going to help you find that stability, find that alignment, and give you a peace of mind because you have a plan. And this gives you momentum. And those of you that might know, right? But think about when you have momentum. Think about when a sports team has momentum, right? They just got a huge block. Let's say a basketball game. Let's say the Lakers, whatever. LeBron James, right? Uh, went up and blocked. Who knows? Names are blank for me. Let's say Jamal Crawford, right? So he went up, blocked him. Stadium went crazy, and at this point, the ball's been turned over. Who has the momentum? So there's that quick flip of happiness, right? As a Lakers fan, me, it would be nice to see that, especially if we were losing and then suddenly it turned around a 15, 20-point comeback, which we see all the time in sports. When you rest on it, that's where a team's going to come back on you, right? So the same way if you rest on life, that's again, you lose your momentum. In the same way playing a sports team, right? So it's you versus life. It's the same kind of concept. So joy is the downstream of order, right? Chaos itself never creates happiness. It only creates relief when it stops. And that's the hardest part because that's where you'll feel relief. So eventually you go so hard at it, there's so much chaos that the relief only happens when it stops. It's either when you make a change or again it stops. And that's the unfortunate part where a lot of us again find our situation and where we have these thoughts that get deep inside us, again these dark thoughts that try and trick you, right? They play tricks on your mind and tell you these people don't care about you and yada yada yada, right? That's the hardest part, and that's where we talk about the R3 method and we talk about recognizing, resetting, and readjusting your approach, right? Recognizing that, hey, those dark thoughts are in my head, resetting and figuring out, okay, how can I do things differently right now to change how I can move forward so that I don't get those dark thoughts or the negative thoughts, you could say, even. So that's where we're going to talk about the upstream framework, something that I'm kind of working through. So it's a work in product or in progress. But upstream framework, there's four places happiness is built on based on that type of framework. I'm not saying I'm right and everybody else is wrong, but this is the direction that the upstream framework, the downstream framework, it's what makes sense to me. And so the first one is identity, who you are before the pressure hits, right? Values, your standards, your non-negotiables, right? The things you're not willing to budge on, your discipline, your character, right? Who are you? What's your identity before that pressure hits? Now look at your environment, right? We all know nature versus nurture, right? Our environment is going to be what shapes our behavior. So if like as a dad, if I just let my kids go wild running through the store, knocking everything off the shelves, and I never parented them and I never taught them that that's not the appropriate way we behave, they're going to learn that behavior. And this is where we get the terrible generations and people within those generations, but it's a compounding thing. It's only going to get worse and worse unless we recognize it within and make a change. So the people that are around you, the inputs, the media, right? The physical space that you're in. If you're in a gross house that is never cleaned, you're probably not the cleanest person either, which means maybe while you're working with a team of peers, you smell badly of BO because you don't take care of your body. It's hard to deal with that. Soldiers run into it all the time. We've had to tell soldiers, hey, soldier, go put, some deodorant on because it's hard to work in that. And sometimes it's so pungent that it's almost impossible. So your environment is going to dictate every part of happiness, every part of your mental everything, which is where the R3 framework that we've talked about comes into play. And so then we talk about the systems, right? So the first two being identity, your environment for the second one. The third one is systems. This is how you remove friction, right? Your morning routine, habits. right? How long does it take you to form a habit? Now, while they say 14 to 21 days, some people are different, and some people can snap right back into a habit in 5 minutes because they found a quick comfort, right? We talked about that with happiness. That's just something happiness is sold as. Comfort isn't true happiness. It's just us escaping from the negative and the dark emotions, right? So your money flow, right? That's where we talk about budgeting as a family and when you're in a marriage. Your health habits. Do you go on walks daily or do you just sit there and watch TV all day long? If you love TV so much, get a treadmill, get a bike, get something so you can actively move, but still enjoy the things you enjoy. It's not difficult, but if you want to keep enjoying those things, you have to form better health habits. And I can tell you now, if you feel healthier, you're going to feel happier. It's just a natural thing because your body is able to now better balance all the chemicals, the hormones, everything that's in your body. And so systems also come to communication rules, right? That's where you have your kind of your walls, right? What's my end? Like this is where I stop, you know? So your communication rules aren't just with somebody else, but it's also being honest with yourself. And the last part is energy, right? The whole idea of what fuels consistency, what fuels us to get up every day and want to move forward. You know, that's the will versus the want. Will you do it? Maybe. Do you want to do it? That's the real question, right? Sure, I'll do it, I guess, but I'm not going to be happy doing it unless you reframe how you look at things. If you reframe how you take care of your body. So sleep, that's a big part. For me, I struggle with sleep, not by choice. I deal with a lot of chronic pain from my time in airborne. And, you know, I broke my shoulder basically, and I've had multiple surgeries. And so I feel a lot of chronic pain, and sometimes it's harder to sleep. That's not the only thing, though, right? We have nutrition, we have movement. Did you move throughout that day enough to make your body tired? Or are your energy reserves still there and nothing's depleted enough for you to kind of lull yourself off to sleep, I guess? So then you have recovery, and this is where I dropped the ball on. The recovery side was important for me in surgery, but being as stubborn as I am, I I didn't. I said, "Oh, I can do this." You know, it's like my chief. We had at the time he had a full ankle reconstruction, and he's so hardcore he jumped out of an airplane a month later. I say, and I mean, again, he hurt himself again, but props, right? That's the thing is like he wanted it, right? He wanted it so badly that he was willing to put his body on the line. Well, that's what's now going to take you back and you're resetting your recovery time. You're having another surgery. Nobody wants to recover from surgery. And if you haven't recovered from surgery, I'll tell you right now, nobody nobody wants to recover from surgery. But there are things outside of that that if that's what makes, you know, like my chief, if that's what makes him more happy, then that's where you got to again check your own level. So I can't sit here and say this is what makes you happy, right? These are just systems that we look at. So I'm not saying everybody has to focus on recovery, but I will be the first one to tell you I didn't focus on recovery as much as I should have. And it wasn't so much recovery, it was just getting back to it too soon. Just like with my chief, you know. So those are things we have to be cognizant of, you know. And so if you fix these upstream, though, the downstream is going to take care of itself so much more. The water is not going to be as crazy. It's not going to be as intense. Think of it like a major storm, and you're able to bypass that storm because you can see it before you get to it. So the thing I want to talk to everybody about it, I mean, we all have many and many stories, and there's plenty of times that I could have fixed something upstream myself, which is why I talk about this because I, of course, want to to give off my wisdom to somebody who may not yet realize that this is a big deal because if we don't plan upstream, if we don't take care of ourselves, we don't take care of our family, we don't take care of things upstream, downstream is chaos. Downstream is fragments of families and lives and souls and people separated, right? So it goes all the different ways. And if you start ignoring the signs upstream and saying, well, that looks kind of weird, like, huh, maybe it's a warning, but you're not seeing it as a warning at that point. You're bypassing it because it's easier to walk away, at least right then and there. But if you understand the price that of walking away right there at that moment and not realizing the warning signs and not realizing that you're about to fall off a cliff, a waterfall, that is, you have to understand, right? Sure, it's easy for me to walk away and not communicate. Excuse me. And that's my problem. One of the biggest things I struggle with is communication. And it's not so much, I guess, communication as it is one person understanding something and another person understanding it differently, right? Misinterpretation. We all speak something to somebody in our lives, and they say something back and like say, "Oh, that's not what I meant." Well, that's what they heard, right? Not a big deal, but that's a very simple thing that if you were to just simply communicate. I'll give an example. I had a roommate in the past, and they would just make all these rapid changes, throughout the house and throughout everywhere, and without even asking. They were simply just renting out a room, and we had a family at the time, or still have family, obviously, but we only had one of our daughters, so our other daughter wasn't there at the time. But that's the situation: is he would walk through the whole house and would make all these changes and do all these things, and we would keep telling him, "Hey, please just communicate with us. Let us know. Hey, if you have an idea and you think that's a good idea and you want to make a change, cool, go ahead and do it." But he decided to swap out, like our daughter's shower curtain without even just saying, "Hey, can I do this?" That's our daughter's bathroom. We had a bathroom, our daughter has a bathroom, and we had another bathroom. So it wasn't a big deal that she had her own bathroom, but he was using it because the other one was just a half bath. Again, simple things. Right? Then our daughter comes up and says, "Why is he making all these changes? This is my space." And so now you're not just impacting me, right? You're impacting my daughter when we continue to ask you to communicate and you keep doing it. So either at that point you're just malicious or you just don't care, or the stupidity is just beyond reasoning. And that's as honest as it can get. But there is so much price that is paid when it comes to not communicating. And that's the thing we have to understand: is he could have easily fixed this upstream and listened to us from the start, right? It wasn't hard, but he bypassed everything. He didn't listen. He didn't see the warning signs until you get all the way down the point and all these changes keep building up, and then it becomes a mountain, right? It's a mountain of a molehill, as they say. But it literally becomes something so much bigger than it ever needed to be, because we didn't plan for it upstream. We didn't communicate. We didn't build what needed to be there, what structures or systems needed to be in place so that we could handle the things downstream, so that the waters were a little more calm and they didn't have to be so rough and so chaotic. So vulnerability in this and really seeking within is probably the most important part. But I wasn't unhappy because life was unfair per se. I was unhappy because I refused to understand, or at least at that point know, that building upstream is going to help you so much better downstream. And so, while yes, it would have been great for me to have this perspective and this understanding when I was, like I said, in high school, we can all go back. But I have two beautiful daughters. So, what can I do now but take my wisdom and try and help them plan for what's downstream? So, I want everybody to think of it this way, because that is the connection. Don't build your not build yourself up, I guess, but don't tear yourself down. Build yourself up to the point where you understand, hey, I've been through it. I've learned the hard lessons the hard way. That's where wisdom and true wisdom gets built. So sometimes you give somebody wisdom and they don't want to hear it. Cool. Given plenty of wisdom, again, past roommate, right? They don't want to hear it. Eventually they'll figure it out. hopefully, but you've done your part. So don't fret beyond that. The biggest important part here is responsibility without shame. Excuse me. Responsibility without shame. I mean, this goes for other people, right? But this is where it goes within. And it's all about what you think and whether or not you're willing to take responsibility. And sometimes I take too much responsibility and come across to passive passive aggressive, but um, ownership and self-hate aren't the same thing. So understand owning it. I did this, and while I don't feel sorry is enough, I am sorry, and I will show you I'm going to do better. Versus, you know, I just suck at everything, and I'm a terrible person, and I can't do any right by you, and so there's the self hate. So you can't dive into that, right? We have to dive into the ownership side where we own it. We don't direct blame. We don't direct it inward, and we don't direct it inward to outward. Responsibility, though, equals freedom, just like being honest equals freedom, right? Blame traps you downstream. Blame doesn't allow you to realize that you're still technically upstream from your next destination. So if you get trapped in this downstream mentality, you're never going to see yourself as you're upstream and that you still have so much more to look forward to. So again, upstream versus downstream. I really want you to start thinking, and you don't have to, right? I guess I hope you start thinking about this because it's really going to help take out some of your internal blame and some of, I guess, what you feel the judgment is portrayed upon you. And I say that because I felt that, right? I feel that. And I think we all feel that in some way. That's why I talked about earlier. It's easier to walk away than deal with the hard things until that hard thing hits you in the face so hard that you can't walk away from it. And that's when you can't take it back. Right now, there's parts of you that can take it back. There's parts of it that you can avoid. It's less chaotic now if you take responsibility than wait till you hit it downstream. And I could, I'm a testament, and I've lived that throughout my whole life. That's something we have to think about, not just with yourself. You see others do it too. You can't change somebody. They have to be willing to change themselves. So ownership is what moves you upstream. Blame is what's going to trap you downstream and never allow you to see that you're still upstream. You still have so much more to look forward to. So the thing that I want you to, again, really think about, please, the moment you stop blaming is the moment your life starts changing. The moment you start owning your downfalls is the moment your life starts changing. I mean this wholeheartedly. And this is where happiness starts to come, right? You start letting go of the things that really are tearing you down and holding you down. And when we break down really the pillars of happiness, right, and breaking down how to understand the W6 method, right? Who, what, where, when, why, but more importantly, answering how to every one of those questions. And then we talk about the will versus want. These are things you have to start asking yourself. But when you start looking upstream and start planning for the good things downstream, life becomes so much better. And if you can start planning as much as you can, right, for the things that are happening downstream, then once you hit that turmoil, once you hit that chaos, it's so much easier to deal with than it would be if you never had planned for it. And the hardest thing, again, and I could say the one thing we can never plan for is death, right? Family members, beloved pets, generally just people, right? That's we can't plan for death. That's the impossible thing, right? We can't plan for, I guess, when it will happen. We can plan death all we want. We just don't know when. And I guess there's that end all be all question, like we've seen it in the movies. If you could know the day you die, would you? Right? Would you know looking downstream that this is when it's going to happen? I wouldn't, because now all I'm doing is looking at a clock. And how many of us know the more we look at a clock, the slower time goes. But the older we got, the quicker time went. And so this is where we have to really dive deeper into ourselves and understand what we can do honestly with ourselves and in a grounded way. Not to sugarcoat anything, but I want you to ask yourself, what is one thing you see downstream right now? One thing that you're currently not planning for upstream, but the one thing you may not be able to name it, but you see the storm coming, right? You see the storm in front of you, and you can choose 12 different paths, and two of those will bypass the storm. The others will take you right into the heart of it. And that's what we have to think about is, like I said, we can't always plan for, let's say, the inevitable, but we can set up a system. We can find, a team, a support system. We can make sure we communicate. We have a plan, just like in business, just like in life, just like in relationships, friendships, school. Everything comes with planning upstream so that we can be ready for what happens downstream. We know once we're born, we're eventually going to go to school. Once we go to school, we're going to go to college. So I can look downstream and I can plan for college when I, let's say, turn 14, 15, 16, which many people will say it's too late by then anyway, but it's better late than never, and that's where we have to really look at that. But there are things downstream and not necessarily college, let's say, but there are decisions you will have to make downstream that you can plan for now, or like I said, you can later get hit in the face with it so hard that you get knocked back on your ass and you don't know how to get up. Think about those things because if we can understand there are things we can plan for, there are things that we can identify, not everything, but look at your life and start asking those questions, the W6 questions, right? Who? Who do you want to be? What do you want to do? Why do you do what you do? Right? Answer those questions. Ask yourself those questions, right? When do you want to do it by? But like I said, the important part of all those questions is how. If this is who you want to be, how are you going to do it? This is the planning upstream. The how is what helps you plan. So use those questions to identify what it is, who it is, why, where, when, what, everything. But identify the how. How is your purpose going to push you forward? Use the R3 method to recognize, identify, okay, I've got some negative thoughts showing up. Like I said before, excuse my French, but get the out, man. Like that's in my head. And the only way that I can trigger myself and immediately to give me time and be like, okay, hey, before I get super irritated, I'm recognizing this and I need to step away. There's my reset. I know, okay, hey, I'm starting to get anxious or I'm starting to get overwhelmed or whatever. Think about those types of things for you. How can you recognize? And you just have to talk to yourself. Recognize what are your downfalls, what are your trigger points, what are your issues. Work on them, but recognize what are the triggers, right? What are the warnings, like we talked about upstream that we're seeing right now, left and right of us. We see downstream, there's somebody yelling at us to get out of the water because there's a waterfall coming up. It's like when you go to the beach and you hear someone say, shark in the water, get out of the water, and then you keep swimming. There's your upstream decision that's really dumb, to be honest with you. And now as you get downstream and you stay in that ocean, you're stuck downstream because now you got a shark circling you. The ideas are all there. What you have to do is start asking yourself in the same way I've been asking myself and living all of these methods. And it is helping me find true happiness, I think, in so many ways. And maybe we never will find happiness. Perspective helps so much. Perspective at least helps take away some of the unhappiness, some of the regret, some of the self-hate. So use that perspective. This podcast, I hope, is a great example of it. And I don't hope somebody is going through what I'm going through, right? But I hope somebody takes something away from this because I know we're all dealing with our own pain. We're all dealing with our own stories. So don't fix your mood, fix your sleep. Don't fix motivation, fix the structure, right? Wake up at an earlier time. Don't fix a relationship because you have, let's say, issues. Fix the boundaries. Set those boundaries, communicate. That's with friendships, that's with business, that's with everything. So, as a closing statement, I want everybody please to, like I said, if you haven't yet, subscribe, like, even comment. If you'd like to come on the podcast and you are a veteran yourself, please let me know. I would love to speak with you and see what kind of direction you would want to go, and we could break it down. Like I said, we're unscripted, raw, and real. There is an outline I want to follow, and a direction. Right, I'm upstream, planning for downstream. So I want you to think about our next episode is going to focus a little bit more on environments because what I've talked about before, how do I take care of myself upstream so that downstream I don't fall apart? And so one of those big things for me is video games. It's a release, it's an escape from reality. That's how we all see it. And that's why a lot of us do play video games, whether it be we can do things in video games we can't necessarily do in real life, or it's again just a time for you to escape from the madness that is life. But if that's what helps you balance and stay present and stay upstream instead of being stuck in that downstream mentality, and reacting to everything rather than planning and understanding that, hey, I've got decisions coming up in life that I'm going to have to make. Plan for it now. Everything you do upstream is going to help you downstream. So if you fail to do work upstream, then this is where you start rewarding dysfunction and things don't work for you. And then you get stuck in that cycle. And you, again, like I said with the beach idea, it you're circled by sharks and it's going to be almost impossible to get out of that without some kind of help or intervention from the outside. So happiness isn't found. We all know this. The pursuit of happiness, it's a plan. It's building something brick by brick, like playing Legos. We know right now, eventually I can get to a full, beautiful Lego set. But how many Lego sets are out there? How many varieties of Legos can you build? So every story is different, everything is unique, but there is a final picture that everybody wants to see. So think of it that way. But upstream is where all the work is done when no one's watching. And then when you get downstream, there's the reward, right? Think actors who have won, after being in acting for decades and have never won a Golden Globe or an Emmy. And then finally, after 30 years, they won an Emmy or a Golden Globe or whatever it might be. That is, that's building Legos for a long time. So really dive into understanding trajectories for everybody are different. Happiness for everybody is different, but find what you genuinely guides you to happiness and start planning for what's right now upstream, what you see happening downstream. And again, you have questions, you have things that you know you're going to have to approach when you get there. So start planning for it now. Understand those questions that you have to ask yourself or that you have to ask somebody else. Like, will you marry me? That's a big question, right? So you're planning for that. You don't just typically go about it. And then if you do just make it happen out of the blue without much planning, especially like a proposal, you're often going to look back at regret and hope that you could have done it or at some point in your life you could, you know, renew your vows and make that different. So planning is what makes that downstream work important, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's neutral. So everybody, again, thank you. Our next episode 9, like I said, we'll be with my good buddy Nick. We'll be playing some games. So please stay tuned next week or so for that. And then we'll be back. But everybody, this is the Tavern After Dark. Please make sure you reach out to somebody, build up that support system, communicate, take care of yourself, start planning now for what's upstream so that when you get downstream, you don't have to fight so hard And that is what drains us. That's the enemy. That's what defeats you. That's what takes you out of the game. Stay in the game. Plan for what you know is there. That's gonna make the things that are inevitable much easier to deal with, because now you're not dealing with as much. Think about, like, somebody throws 6 footballs at you. It's gonna be damn near impossible to catch all 6 footballs, but if they threw 3, it might be much easier to catch 2 of them, or maybe all 3. Maybe you can catch all 6 footballs, but guess what? You're not gonna do it every time. So, think about it, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Tavern After Dark. I hope to see you all next time.